this is all on homeostasis and hormones. So here I have a diagram of all the glands that you need to know. So glands are what produce hormones. So we've got the pituitary gland, which is in the brain, thyroid gland in the neck. We have the adrenal gland, which is in the kidneys, pancreas, testes, and ovaries. So you need to know the names of all of these and the hormones they produce and the effects of each of those hormones. So we'll see most of these in some of the questions that we do today. And what I'll do, so like I do every session, I'll annotate this, I'll add notes to this, and at the end you guys can take a screenshot and use it as your notes to help you revise for it. Yeah, I'll zoom in a bit for now, but don't worry, at the end I'll give you guys a chance to screenshot it. So like I said, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, pancreas, testes, ovaries. So what we'll do, we'll look at the first question. I'll add some notes into this as we go. So first one is, human body produces many hormones. What is a hormone? How would you answer that? The question is 1 mark. Does anyone know the answer? Definition of a hormone. A chemical is not enough. A chemical message. Yes, you can get a mark for saying chemical message. Ideal answer is a chemical messenger. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll try and zoom in a bit more on the phone. Just give me 1 second, guys. Just so you guys can see. I hope that's a bit better. So, to get the marks, saying a chemical messenger is enough. You can also get away by saying a chemical produced by a gland or a substance that controls bodily functions. Next question, name an organ that produces a hormone. So this is any of the hormones that I showed you up here. You can literally say any of them, and any of the relevant hormones are applicable. So we could say adrenal gland and talk about adrenaline. It's not even asking for the hormone, so you can just get away by saying adrenaline. Adrenal gland. Adrenal gland. So yeah, you could say ovaries, you could say pancreas. Brain is not enough. You have to say in the brain, you have to say the pituitary gland. So if saying just the brain isn't enough, you need to say the pituitary gland, because that's the actual gland that's involved. Next question, how are hormones transported to their target organs? Yes, I'm seeing the right answers. In the bloodstream. So in the bloodstream. Excellent. All right. Next question is all about the menstrual cycle. Describe how the hormones FSH, estrogen, LH are all involved in the control of the menstrual cycle. So let's go back up to our notes. So these are produced by the pituitary gland, where the LH and the FSH are. So what can you guys tell me? Let's start off with FSH. Let's add this to our notes. FSH, what does the FSH do? It stands for follicle stimulating hormone. Causes an egg to mature. Yes, thank you. So we'll write down matures the egg. Other things it does as well. It does another thing as well. So FSH matures an egg. It has a second function. Does anyone know what that is? Nope, doesn't release the egg. Not quite. Estrogen, exactly. It stimulates ovaries to release estrogen. So stimulates the ovaries to release estrogen. Excellent. So that's the secondary function that we've got here. Next, we've got LH. LH, what does LH do? Releases the egg. Yes, thank you. Excellent. Releases the egg. So I'll give you guys a chance to screenshot all of this at the end. So the other one we wanted to talk about was estrogen in the question. So let's add that in our notes as well. Estrogen. What is the function of estrogen? Stops FSH is one, yes. That's one of the secondary functions. And it thickens the lining, yes. Exactly. So main function is it thickens the lining. And the secondary function, it stimulates LH, so it causes that to get released. And it inhibits FSH. Inhibits FSH. Yep, don't worry guys, I'll give you all a chance to screenshot this at the end once I've added all the notes to it. Okay, so I think we have enough information to answer the question now. So describe how the hormones FSH, estrogen and LH are involved for 3 marks. You get a mark for talking about each one. So we can say something like FSH causes the egg to mature. That's 1 mark there. Then we can talk about estrogen. So estrogen, that thickens the lining. So that can be the 2nd mark. And then the 3rd mark is to talk about LH. So we can say that causes the egg to be released. So LH causes the egg to be released. Does anyone have any questions so far? How are the 3 marks given? Each point is 1 mark. This applies to both combined and triple, yeah. What is LH? LH is luteinizing hormone. So that's the one that I talked about up here. And it causes the egg to be released on day 14 of the menstrual cycle. This is higher, yes it is. Inhibit, okay, that's a good question. Inhibit basically means slows down. So 2 opposite words, stimulates, inhibits. Inhibits means slows down. So it basically slows down or stops the production of FSH. Stimulates is the opposite. It means it basically releases more. So it speeds up. Right, like that. Yeah, so what I'll do, guys, I'll tell you guys, all these questions, I'll be uploading them onto my YouTube channel. So on my YouTube channel, I'll upload this live and then I'll put this, all these questions and this diagram there as well. So you guys can just go through the session again and maybe try the questions yourself. All right, let's move on to the next question. So this one is about controlling body temperature. Humans maintain an almost constant body temperature. Do you guys know what temperature that is, first of all? Yeah, 37 degrees or 37.5, something like that would get you a mark. Not in this question, obviously, that's just extra information. Describe the role of blood vessels in controlling the body temperature. So let's add to our notes. Controlling body temperature. This part of homeostasis, what we'll do is we'll draw a quick table for what happens to the body when body temperature is too high. So when temperature is too high, and then when temperature is too low. So what kind of things happen? We got, everyone's saying the right answers there. We've got vasodilation and vasoconstriction. So vasodilation comes under when temperature is too high, and vasoconstriction is when it's too low. Do you guys know other things that happen when it's too high? When you get too hot and when you get too cold, what are the other things we can add to this table? Sweating, shivering, perfect. So we got sweating, we'll talk about that in a bit. And when you're too cold, you get shivering. And hairs, yes, we got hairs stand up. When it's too cold, the hairs stand up. Perfect. Right, so this question itself, I think, was only talking about, the role of blood vessels. That's the key term there. It's only talking about the vasoconstriction and the vasodilation. So that's what we have to talk about here. So, 4 marks for 4 points. So if temperature is too high, we said it's vasodilation. How do we explain how vasodilation helps that situation? What does vasodilation do? So what does that mean? Yeah, it does. Actually, it doesn't warm you up, it cools you down. Blood is closer to the skin. Yep. Blood goes closer to the skin. More heat energy is given to the environment. Exactly, guys. Okay, so let me explain. So imagine this is the surface of your skin. So we've got the outside air here. So this is your skin. In your skin, you've basically got blood vessels, capillaries. When temperature gets too high, these blood vessels get very wide, they get very big. So they go from looking like this to basically to looking like this. So you have a lot of blood flowing through the blood vessels, and you have a lot of blood flowing near the surface. If you have a lot of blood flowing near the surface, it means it's going to release a lot of heat into the surroundings. And if it releases heat into the surroundings, it's going to cool you down because you're losing heat energy. If it's vasoconstriction, that's the opposite. So vasoconstriction is when these blood vessels get very narrow. So the blood's only flowing through these really narrow blood vessels. So there's not going to be a lot of heat being released into the environment, which keeps all the heat inside the body, which keeps you warm. It acts like insulation. This layer of skin acts like insulation. So that's why this vasodilation cools you down, and vasoconstriction warms you up. I hope that made sense. So what are the marks for? If temperature is too high, you have vasodilation. So that basically means blood vessels near the surface of the skin get wider, so more blood flows near the surface, and more heat is released, or we'll say radiated. So the other half is if temperature is too low, you basically say the opposite. So if temperature is too low, you have vasoconstriction. You can say blood vessels become narrow and less blood flows near the surface, so less heat is radiated. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Does anyone have any questions on this? What app am I writing on? It is, what's it called? Good Notes. It's called Good Notes. Okay. So, on to the next question. Sorry, let me move this out of the way if I can. Okay, next question. An athlete can run a marathon in 2 hours and 15 minutes on a dry day outside, temperatures up to 35 degrees. If the air is dry, his body will not overheat. In humid conditions, the same athlete can run the marathon the same time. However, if the outside temperature goes over 18 degrees, then his body will overheat. What's the explanation for that? So let's explain the question first of all. So we've got a marathon runner running at two different temperatures, 35 degrees, 18 degrees. 35 degrees, it's dry, but 18 degrees is humid. When it's dry, doesn't overheat. But when it's humid, it does overheat. Does anyone know why? Reduced sweat rate due to humidity? Yes. That sounds good. Is the body working harder in humid? I wouldn't say it would technically be working harder, but that's not really answering the question. But it is to do with sweat. So if we go back to you could explain it using concentration gradient as well. So if we go back to this, body temperature, when the temperature is too high, we start to sweat. Does anyone know why sweating cools us down? Evaporates. Yes, it evaporates water. So it causes water to evaporate from our body. And when it evaporates, it basically takes heat energy away with it. heat energy is removed. Okay, so water evaporates, heat energy is removed. The problem with this situation in this question is that it's humid. Humid means there's basically water in the air. There's a high percentage of water vapor in the air. And if there's water in the air, that means it's going to be hard for the water on your skin to evaporate because there's such a high concentration in the air. It's a bit like concentration gradient. If there's a low concentration gradient, there's not going to be much water or diffusion happening. And if there's not a lot happening, a lot of water being released, that means the person's going to cool down less. Therefore, they're going to overheat. This is combined and triple content, guys. So for 3 marks, 1 mark is to say sweat. Mentioning sweat is released. And then you say, but does not evaporate much, or evaporates very little. As there is a high humidity. Or you can talk about the water vapor in the air. So there is less heat loss. Does everyone understand the question? My explanation? Or is there anything you guys want me to explain? Okay, good. Yep, it can be on Edexcel as well. On to the next question. Climber falls down a mountain slope into a small pool of cold water. He's injured and cannot move. He starts to get cold. How does the body detect a decrease in blood temperature? Do I mean doesn't? In which one? Sorry. Are you talking about this? No, this is right. If it's dry, the person doesn't overheat, but when it's humid, they do overheat because the sweat's not released as much. But does evaporate. Oh, okay. Yep. Sorry, that should say doesn't. Thank you. Doesn't. Sweat is released, but doesn't evaporate much as there's a high humidity. Yep, thanks for that. Back to this question. How does a body detect a decrease? I think I got some of the right answers. Thermoregulatory center. Yes, excellent. So you can say thermoregulatory center, or you can say something else. It begins with H. Does anyone know? It's part of the brain. HY. But thermoregulatory center is fine. Hypothalamus, exactly. So you can say thermoregulatory center, or you can say hypothalamus as well. Both fine. Good. The man starts shivering. Explain how shivering helps to raise his body temperature. How does shivering help, guys? What does that do? Movement. Saying movement is not enough. Muscles contract. Yes, that's right. So muscles contract. What do you need for muscles to contract? what reaction happens in your body that causes muscles to react? I don't think anyone said that yet. It's a reaction. Respiration, thank you, Eva. So muscles contract, which requires respiration, and that respiration releases energy. That's how shivering keeps you warm. So muscles contract, and we'll say respiration releases energy. Running out of space here. So those are the 3 marks. So first we say muscles contract, which requires energy. Which we'll say releases, actually. Which releases energy. Due to respiration. So 1 mark for muscles contract, releases energy. 2nd mark, respiration is the 3rd mark. Hope that made sense. Apart from shivering, explain how the man's body responds to raise his core body temperature. What do you guys think? That's what's in our table. Yep, you can say hairs stand up. But I'll tell you why you can't say that, actually, because it says to raise his core body temperature. So that's like the inside of his body. So it's better to talk about vasoconstriction, because it's talking about the core body. That's inside your body. It's the blood vessels inside your body. So that's what we need to talk about. So the same 3 marks as before. We say blood vessels near the surface get narrower. So less blood flows near the surface. And less heat is transferred or radiated, you can say, like we said before, to the surroundings or environment. Okay, so I'm hoping that's fine. On to the next one. Okay, endocrine glands produce hormones. Hyperthyroidism is caused by an overactive thyroid gland. What would happen to the body of a person with hyperthyroidism? Overactive basically means it's producing too much hormone, or whatever hormone that's connected to it. So we're talking about the thyroid gland here. So we're talking about the hormone thyroxine. Does anyone know what would happen if someone produces too much thyroxine? Yeah, exactly. Thyroxine would be overproduced, but what would happen? What type of effect will it have on them? Does anyone know what thyroxine does? grow a tail. No. High metabolism. Good. Yes, thyroxine is all to do with metabolism. So the more thyroxine you have, the higher your metabolism. And if you have more metabolism, what does metabolism mean? Does anyone know what metabolism means? All chemical reactions in the body, exactly. All chemical reactions in the body. So we have loads of reactions happening in the body. All of them together is what we call our metabolism. So most important one is probably respiration. And all the reactions, we'll say. So if someone has an overactive thyroid gland, it means their metabolism is going to increase, which means all their reactions, including respiration, is going to be happening at a much higher rate. And that should give you all the marks. How many marks? Is it 3 marks? Yes. So you get 1 mark for saying too much thyroxine will be released. So metabolism will increase. And there's an increase in the rate of reactions, or you can say respiration. I hope that made sense. Okay, next one. Describe the roles of FSH and LH in the menstrual cycle. How's everyone's memory? Do you guys remember what we wrote at the top? For 2 marks. Yep, thank you. Are you supposed to know what hyperthyroidism is? No, you don't need to know this. So you'll get this in your exams, guys. You'll get things that you've never heard of. No one would have learned that in school, probably. In your exams, they'll give you something new and they'll expect you to use your knowledge to answer the question. So here, anyone who did this question, or most people, wouldn't know what hyperthyroidism is, but they need to figure it out in the day of the exam by knowing what a thyroid gland produces and what would happen. So you got to kind of use your own knowledge to try and answer it. It happens every year. You'll get questions like this. They'll give you something new that you've never heard about, and you'll just have to try and use what you know to answer it. Exactly. It's application of your knowledge. So good, guys. We're getting the right answers. So FSH causes the egg to mature. LH causes the egg to be released. You can also say LH, LH inhibits FSH. You can't say that, but you can mention the stimulating ovaries. So FSH stimulates the ovaries to release estrogen. That that would get you a mark as well. Okay, on to the next one. This is another one of those questions where you have to apply your knowledge. So you've got some names here that you probably have never heard of, but on the day of the exam, you get given it. So let's read this question. Let's try and understand what's happening. So the pancreas and the liver are both involved in the control of the concentration of glucose. So this is a blood glucose question. Let's talk about that first before we go on to the question. Blood glucose. So we talked about controlling body temperature. Let's talk about controlling blood glucose. Let's do a similar table. So when blood glucose is too high, when blood glucose is too low. So what do you guys think? What happens when blood glucose is too high? So when it's too high, it's detected by the pancreas. Good. So both of them's detected by the pancreas and insulin is produced. Good. So we'll say pancreas releases insulin. When it's too low, what does the pancreas release? Glucagon. Good. Pancreas releases glucagon. Okay, that's one thing we can say. What does insulin do to the blood glucose? What does it do to the glucose in the blood? Insulin converts, yes, glucose into glycogen. Good. So converts glucose to glycogen. And then what happens with that glycogen? Where does it go? Stored. Thank you guys. You're giving me the answers before I'm even writing it. Stored in the muscle and liver. So glycogen stored in the muscle and liver. And because it's stored in the muscle and liver, what's happened is the amount of glucose in the blood has decreased. So now it's not too high, it's gone down. For too low, it's basically the opposite. It converts glycogen to glucose, so back to glucose, and then it gets released from the muscles and liver into the blood. So it's released into the blood, and that causes blood glucose levels to go up again. Where does glucagon come into this? Glucagon is another hormone. So we got two hormones involved here. We have insulin and glucagon. Insulin is when it's too high, glucagon is when it's too low. Glucose stored in the blood. No, glucose is not stored in the blood. Glucose is stored in the muscle and kidney. It gets released into the blood when you need it. Isn't glucagon converted into glucose? No, it's not. So guys, this is what loads of people get confused with, okay? People get confused between glycogen and glucagon. It's really confusing because they have really similar names. Glucagon is a hormone. It's the opposite of insulin. Glucagon is the opposite of insulin. Glycogen is not a hormone. Glycogen is what glucose turns into. It's a stored form of glucose. Maybe we write this down so you guys remember. So glucagon is a hormone. Glycogen is a stored form of glucose. Hope that makes sense. So hopefully now we can answer that question. So the liver has two veins, the hepatic portal vein. This, don't get confused by the names. The names would throw people off because they've never seen this in biology. Forget the names. But this vein takes blood from the small intestine to the liver. The other one, the hepatic vein, takes it from the liver to the heart. And scientists are measuring the concentration of glucose in both of these. And they're taking samples 1 hour after a meal and 6 hours after a meal. So look at this graph here. Concentration of glucose in the blood are different for both blood vessels. Explain why. So we can see here, the hepatic portal vein has a very high level. The hepatic vein has a low level. What do you guys think the answer to that is? Yeah, I will give you a chance to screenshot the notes at the end. It's a bit of a tricky question, to tell you the truth. It's all to do with where the blood's coming from. This one, the hepatic portal vein, the blood's coming from the small intestine. The hepatic vein is coming from the liver. So try and think about what we said up on our table. Just after you've eaten, what's going to happen? Because glucose is absorbed in the liver, good. So concentration of glucose decreases because the glucose is released. Yes, I'm seeing some right answers here. So this is going from the small intestine to the liver. So this is small intestines where food gets digested. So all the food that you've eaten, all the carbohydrates, is going to release glucose into the blood at this point here. So at that point, as soon as you've eaten, the blood glucose level are going to be very high because you've just eaten, the blood has literally just come out and is being absorbed into your blood. So the blood vessel coming out of your small intestine is going to be very high in glucose. It goes to the liver, and then this vein, the second vein, the hepatic vein, is taking blood from the liver back to the heart. So it's already gone to the liver. And remember what the liver does. The liver is where glycogen is stored. So what's happened is the glucose from the food is coming out in this hepatic portal vein, and then it's going to the liver where the glucose is stored as glycogen. And then when it comes out, there's less glucose in the blood because most of it, or a lot of it, has been stored into the liver. So how do you get 3 marks? So first thing you say is the hepatic portal vein has glucose that's absorbed from food in the intestine. So is higher. Then we can talk about the other one. Concentration is lower. So in the hepatic vein, has a lower concentration. because the glucose has converted into glycogen. So, does everyone understand this? Does anyone have any questions? Still don't get it. Okay, let me try explain it again. So, we've got the small intestine. Okay, we've got the liver. You have just eaten. So when you eat, your small intestine is going to get your food and it's going to break it down into glucose. So what's going to happen is that glucose is going to go into your blood. That is basically your hepatic portal vein. That's what the question's telling us. The hepatic portal vein is blood that's come out of the small intestine. So the hepatic portal vein, we'll call it the HPV, is taking blood from the small intestine to the liver. The liver is where glucose is stored as glycogen. So this is going to be very high in glucose because all the glucose from your food is going to be in this vein. But then you've got the second vein, the hepatic vein, which is coming out the liver. This one's going to have a much lower glucose level because most of the glucose is being converted into glycogen here. So what you're left with is less glucose coming out. Does that make more sense? So where did you get the marks from? So you get the marks for saying glucose that's absorbed from the food. And then the next one is for saying it has a low concentration because it has been converted into glycogen. You need to say one more thing for a mark, and that's to say why it's turned into glycogen. We'll say due to insulin. Sorry, I forgot to write that. You have to mention the hormone. So insulin gets released and converts into glycogen here. Okay, good guys. Thank you. Let's try another one. So carrying on with this question, they've given us the second graph here. So it shows the concentration of glucose in the two blood vessels 6 hours after a meal. So same two blood vessels, but you can see here, this time the HPV is lower than the other one. The concentration of glucose in the hepatic portal vein has decreased after 6 hours. Why? Why do you think that is? Yeah, glucose has been used. Glucose has been absorbed. Yep, exactly. You've used it after 6 hours. You've finished eating. Your body's using the glucose now for respiration or for other things. So there's going to naturally be less of it coming out of the small intestine. So you can just say glucose is absorbed for 1 mark. Okay, the person does not eat any more food during the 6 hours after a meal. However, after 6 hours, concentration of glucose in the blood in the hepatic vein, so this is the one coming out the liver, is higher than the glucose in the HPV. So it's saying this one here, the one coming out the liver, has a higher blood glucose concentration than this one. Why could that be? What's happened here? Yes, Tasha, that's right. Because, yep, that's good. Because the glycogen has been converted into glucose. Exactly. So low glucose concentration must have been detected. So throughout the day, you're using all the glucose in your body. if you haven't eaten for 6 hours, what's going to happen is you don't have your glucose concentration in your blood is going to go down. So you need more of it. And because you haven't eaten, you're not going to get it from your food. So your body needs to start converting all that glycogen you have stored here back into glucose. Because you're not getting it from the food, the liver has to re-release some of that glycogen back into glucose. And what hormone will cause it to do that? Yes, glucagon, exactly. So let me remind you guys, we've got 2 hormones, insulin, glucagon. Insulin causes glucose to turn into glycogen. Glucagon causes glycogen in the liver to turn back into glucose. So this is when blood glucose is too low. So 6 hours after a meal, your blood glucose is going to get low, and that's what's going to happen. So 3 marks, explain why. So you can say, because glucagon causes the glycogen to be converted into glucose, and glucose is released into the blood through the hepatic vein, the HV. Obviously in your exams you'd write hepatic vein.